Hello Elite members, welcome to another roster review. Today we are reviewing Harrison Sharpe's Necron list that he submitted. It's a very interesting list. Before we get into it, remember the link down below. If you would like your roster to have a chance of being reviewed here, please submit it using the link below. And who knows, maybe you'll be on next week. So, Harrison Sharpe's Necron list. Let's get on to step one, the actual list. First of all, the whole of it, every single detachment he's got is a custom dynasty that he's made himself. It's relentlessly expansionist, which is the circumstance of awakening. And then the dynastic tradition is eternal conquerors. That's the first thing to note. And then it starts off with a patrol detachment. The HQ is a catacomb command barge with a Gauss cannon. And that is the Warlord. The Lord on that barge is the Warlord. He has the Enduring Warlord trait and the Voltaic Staff relic. Then we have a Chronomancer with an Entropic Lance. A unit of 10 Immortals with the Gauss weapon. In Elite, we have the Nightbringer, because he's amazing, with the Gaze of Death and an Antimatter Meteor. And then the 2 fast attack slots are 2 units of 4 Canoptek Scarab Swarms. Then we have a Vanguard detachment, also relentlessly expansionist and eternal conquerors. The HQ in that is a Lord with a Resurrection Orb, because why not? And also a War Scythe, making him a bit scarier. The troops are another unit of 10 Immortals with the Gauss weapon. 2 units of 2 Crypto Thralls as elites, and the third elite, making it a Vanguard, is a Transcendent Catan, who's got Time's Arrow and Transdimensional Thunderbolt. Then in the fast attack, we have 2 units of 3 Canoptek Wraiths, and then there is an auxiliary support detachment to finish off the army, and it's just an elite, which is another Transcendent Catan, which has got the Cosmic Fire and the Sky of Falling Stars Catan powers, which is really cool. So that's what the list is. Let's have a look at how it works. So on to how it works then, guys. First of all, let's have a look at the dynastic tradition. So it's eternal conquerors, and that means that everybody gets objective secured. Now, this is every single model in this army gains objective secured other than the 3 Catan models. So the 2 Transcendent Catans and the Nightbringer, they cannot benefit from it, but everybody else gets objective secured, which is massive. You know, you're thinking about things like the Scarabs, the Wraiths, the Crypto Thralls. These units are like fast-moving units. They can advance and they can just take objectives, and they're objective secured. And the most important thing to remember about it, though, is any unit that already has the objective secured ability, like troops, counts as 2 models. So these 10-man immortal units count as 20 models if they're all an objective, which is horrible and really helps you play the primaries. So I can see why that's been taken. Then the circumstance of awakening is relentlessly expansionist. Now, this is incredible as well because the armies are quick anyway. Loads of the units that have been taken around it are fast. So to be able to have this on top of that is really nice. And it is at the start of the first battle round, before the first turn begins, your units can move up to 6 inches. They can make a normal move of up to 6 inches. So you cannot advance. That means if your move is 5, you move 5. But it's basically a move before the game, which gets you into a great position because it's done at the start of the first battle round, which is after you roll to see who goes first. So you can have units that are, you know, in a fairly decent place where there's a ruin behind them or, you know, some obscuring terrain behind them. And then if you go first, what you could do is you could put them on a line wherever there's terrain within range of them. Then if you don't go first, you can move backwards, say 6 inches behind those, you know, that terrain feature is going to protect you a bit more. But what it essentially does is, because you're 6 inches in front of that terrain piece, if you then go first, you get to move 6 inches forward. So you've gained 12 inches from the ruin you'd have to hide behind if you're going second. You've gained 12 inches on that if you're going first. Plus, then you can move and advance in your turn anyway. So it just gives you more presence on the board. And then your objective secured. So it just helps you get to those objectives a little bit quicker and makes it more annoying if your opponent to have to shift you. So I can see why this dynasty is the one that's, you know, very popular right now and is in this list too. First of all, then we have the Catacomb Command Barge. Now, the Voltaic Staff is the relic he's got, which gives him 4 shots. It's got the Tesla ability, so every time you roll a 6 to hit, it counts as 3 hits, basically. You get 2 additional hits. It is Strength 6, -2, and 2 damage, which is great in the meta at the moment. He then has the Enduring Will Warlord trait, which is you subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of all attacks that target him. When you couple that with the fact that he's got Quantum Shielding, so he can only ever be wounded on a 4+ and has a 5-pin vulnerable save, makes him incredibly hard to kill. But then he also moves 12 inches, so he's a nice little counterpunch because he's also strength 6 -2 damage in combat as well. So it's a nice little counterpunch that moves around 12 inches, moves along your own lines behind these smaller units that are in the army, just offering some range support, which is very nice. Also gives My Will Be Done if you need him to, which is really good on those immortals, basically. Then you have a Chronomancer in the army, and he gives 1 unit a 5-pin vulnerable save every turn. Of course, that is most likely going to go on the immortals so that they can, come out onto an objective, hold the objective, have decent shooting with My Will Be Done, and then be fairly resilient with the 5-pin vulnerable save on them. Next we're going to say the 2 units 10 immortals, but that is what they do. They're decent fire support that you chuck out onto an objective. They're tough to kill because they'll be toughness 5 with the 5-pin vulnerable save. And then they count as double the number of models when they're on an objective with objective secured because of Eternal Conquerors, which is very nice. Then you've got a Lord in the army, and he's got a Resorb, which again is to make the immortals even harder to shift. If any of them survive, you use the Resorb, and then you get to roll reanimations for the whole squad, which, is just 3 models coming back. So, if you lose 8 from that squad, and then he does that and 3 more come back, you've just gained like 50 points worth of free models. Why would you not take it? It's great. And then he's also a great counterpunch because he's got a War Scythe. Of course, he's not that quick, but that's why, you use him to guard things like the Crypto Thralls. And if somebody comes to the Crypto Thralls, he then just jumps in and starts scything away. Or the Immortals, guard the Immortals. So if a decent unit gets into them that's hard to shift, he can just run in there with his War Scythe and take them out. You then have triple Catans. Triple Catans are amazing. They're a mortal wound battery, and they just chuck out loads of mortal wounds in the form of their Catan powers. You have 6 Catan powers between them, and you can get up to 5 off a turn because you can do 1 each with the Transcendent Catans, 2 with the Nightbringer, and then you can pay a CP to do additional ones, so you can do 5, which is nasty. It's a lot of mortal wounds that could potentially run at your opponent. And also, they apply pressure. They just run directly forward because they've got that rule where they can only lose a maximum of 3 wounds per phase, and then they all regain 1 wound in your command phase, which is nasty. They're going to be very hard for people to deal with. And, we've seen that it can be hard for your opponent to deal with 1 Catan. When there's 3 of them, it's just going to... They won't be able to concentrate on the rest of your army for a couple of turns because they'll just be concentrating on killing the Catans that are running directly at them, which is really nice. And they also protect the units that are playing the mission by being distractions. They run directly forward. They're good in combat. They've got good mortal wound output with the Catan powers. They're tough to shift. And, they kind of just like spread out and go up as like a 3, staying sort of like 6 to 8 inches apart from each other, just so they're covering the whole of your front line. And then, if your opponent wants to go for the units behind them, they're going to let 3 Catans wade into their lines, or they're going to spend 2 or 3 turns dealing with the Catans, and then the units behind are just going to have gone so far ahead on points with both primaries and secondaries that they won't be able to catch up. So I like the idea of the triple Catans running directly forward and then having these little units playing the mission behind them. You then have the little units. So there are 2 units of Crypto Thralls. Crypto Thralls are amazing because in a little unit of 2, they're toughness 5 with 4 wounds. They have a 3-up save, so if you leave them on a ruin, they've got 2-up saves. They're great backfield objective holders, and they're perfect to perform actions for you. You then have 2 units of 3 Wraiths. These are amazing because they're fast, they're tough to shift, and of course they've gained objective secured with Eternal Conquerors. So they just move forward, advance, go onto objectives with their invulnerable save. They're really hard to kill. They also have reanimation protocols now. So, they've got a chance of coming back, and they can just hold objectives. And the perfect thing about them is if your opponent tries to take an objective off them by coming close with 4 objective secured models, say, or a unit that's got 5 objective secure models, to your 3, you've got a 1 CP stratagem called Enslaved Protectors, and it lets you heroically intervene with a Canoptech unit. So those Wraiths can just heroically intervene and make sure they're clearing little fast-moving chaff squads with objective secure that try to take the objectives off them. So that's really nice. Then you've got the 2 units of Scarabs. Now, the 2 units of Scarabs are just in the list there because, again, they're fast moving and they're objective secured. So the way that you can play them is either run forward as fast as you can and try and do secondaries and maybe a few primaries because your opponent's distracted with the Catans before they eventually die, or they can be used to, because they're so quick, run out in front of the Catans if your opponent's got things like mortal wound output that you know can really hurt the triple Catan. You can just whack the Scarabs out front and they can kind of like hit the brunt of smite batteries from psychic armies and stuff like that, like Grey Knights, Thousand Suns, even Orcs with their reliable D6 damage smites. So these can run to the front and take hits from things like that. And, you know, it can stop your Catans from being charged and stuff by combat armies. So I think the Scarabs are like multi-purpose in this army. And that's basically how the entire list works. So it's very tough. Now let's have a look at how we tackle it. So this awesome Necron list here, it applies loads of pressure. Let's have a look at how we're going to tackle it. So the first thing to think about here is multi-phase interaction. That's the biggest thing you can do, especially mortal wounds, because you got to remember the way that this list works is by playing the backfield mission and the midfield mission with their objective secured units, and then the Catans just run directly at you. So the Nightbringer and both Transcendent Catans are just going to be running straight up the board. So you need to find ways of dealing with them. And the way to do that is by having an army that interacts in multiple phases. Now, if you're a Tau army and you're stood in the corner, you're going to lose to this Necron army. There is pretty much nothing you can do because you only interact in one phase of the game, that's the shooting phase, and you're not very mobile. So there's no way you're getting to the units behind these Catans without first taking the Catans down. And they will reach your lines like turn 2 or 3, and you can't kill them that quick. So you're done, basically. So multi-phase interaction is one of the biggest things you can do, especially mortal wounds. So think about it. Armies like Grey Knights, where they can dish out enough mortal wounds to probably take 3 wounds off all 3 Catans in the psychic phase, and then they'll be able to shoot possibly 3 wounds off 2 different Catans in the shooting phase, and then they're actually pretty good in combat as well. So armies like that stand a decent chance of getting rid of these Catans in like 2 turns, so that turn 3+ they can run across the board. Then you have armies like Orcs. Orcs are one of the armies that are especially good at doing it because their smites can reliably, you know, on an 8, they can go off big and then do D6 mortal wounds. That can hurt a Catan. It could just straight away knock all the wounds off that it can take in the psychic phase in one go. And then on top of that, you can do mortal wounds in the movement phase by flying planes over, using flying headbutt to explode your plane. And like we say, when you've got 3 Catan, it's going to be very hard to keep those Catans like, 16, 17 inches apart from each other, because when you do flying headbutt, your plane automatically crashes and burns. And if it's a burner bomber, it does flat 3 mortal wounds to all units within 6 inches of it. Now, you know, the base of a flyer, even if you take the narrowest bit, so widthways, is about 4 inches, 3.5, 4 inches, and then it's 6 inches from either side of that. You would have to keep your Catan over 16 inches away from each other so that more than one of them didn't get hit by this, which is not going to happen. So something like that, where your plane could just stand in the middle, flying headbutt, take 3 wounds off 2 different Catan in the movement phase, and then your smites hit as well, and you've done it in the psychic phase. Then you've got things like tank busters that are flat 3 damage, who can do shoot phase. You're good in combat because you've got boys and all of that kind of stuff, mega knobs. So Orcs can actually do wounds in all 4 phases of the game to something like this, and they're one of the armies that I think that could kill Catans in like 2 turns and then have turn 3+ to deal with the rest of the army. Very cool. And that's one thing you want to think about, is armies that can do mortal wounds in the movement phase. You know, just anything like bombers from any army, Void Raven bombers with the new Drakari book, the Orc bombers, the Archaeopters from Adeptus Mechanicus, and just any plane as well, really, because they can ignore the Catan. Any units that you can take that can ignore the Catan is a good way of getting around them too. So planes are the perfect example because they can just fly like 50 inches over the Catan right into your opponent's, backfield and actually start clearing up the little chaff units like the Scarabs, who don't really have a save, the Crypto Thralls, who've only got 4 wounds in the squad total, things like that. You can actually take them off objectives and take primaries away from them. So that's another thing that you want to be able to do, is take units that don't need to interact with the Catan and can just ignore them. The next thing is out of line of sight range threat. Very important, like we say. You're going to have these little units of Scarabs and Crypto Thralls who are just sitting on objectives, and they are fairly tough to shift for out of line of sight. But things like Wyverns will deal with the Scarabs no problem. Manticores will get rid of those Crypto Thralls no problem as well. Whirlwind Scorpius, just all of these kind of things. The Belleros energy cannons, I believe they're called, from the Adeptus Mechanicus boats that fire out of line of sight as well. So you've got all of these cool interactions that can shoot out of line of sight. Might as well make use of them, and this is a great army to play them against. On top of that, I think what you want is big units with objective secured. Big units with objective secured will cause this army a lot of problems, because quite a few of the units in this army are just small, like 2-man Crypto Thrall units. Yes, they've got objective secured, but they're 2-man, and they're not already troops, so they don't get objective secured ×2. They just get, like, they count as 2 models with obsec. So if you've got big units that run up to them, even the wraiths, because the wraiths can heroically intervene you and fight you, there's still only 3 of them. So if you could take a big unit, if you could have a unit of, I don't know, like 10 intercessors, and they can go and sit on objective next to these wraiths, when those wraiths heroically intervene, they're probably only going to kill like 3, maybe even 4 intercessors, and then you've still got a 6-man unit, so the objective is still yours. So big objective secure units are a great way of making the units that want to play the mission for this list obsolete. And then you've got 2 little things here. Is the first one is deep striking threats. So it's not that big, but basically what you're doing is you're going to force this list to have to screen its back field as well as its front field. Now, the front is definitely going to be screened off by 3 Catan running forward, but the back, sometimes you're only going to want to leave 1 unit of Crypto Thralls at the back because you only have 1 objective in your deployment zone, and then the other units you want to kind of send in the midfield to play the mission as well as you can. Well, if you've got deep striking threats that can come in and take that back Crypto Thrall unit off and steal your opponent's objective, all of a sudden they might have to waste 2, even 3 units screening their backfield. So it's just eliminating some of the units that they've got from being used efficiently. So deep striking threats is a great way of, like, reducing what the list does in effect. Like, not exactly tackling it, but reducing what it can do efficiency-wise. And the final thing is cheap chaff units. Now, it might not seem like cheap chaff units are going to do anything in this game, and you're totally right. They're not going to do any damage. The idea of the cheap chaff units is they will be the ones that can soak up mortal wounds from Catan powers that target the nearest enemy unit. Like the Gaze of Death's only got a 9-inch range. The Antimatter Meteor hits, I believe, the closest enemy unit within 24 inches. So all of these kind of Catan powers that are hitting the closest unit, at least you can soak up those mortal wounds with your little chaff units. And the brilliant thing is, the Transcendent Catans have only got 5 attacks each, and they cannot swing for multiple attacks. So, because they've only got 5 attacks, you can tie them up in combat. If you've got cheap chaff units of 10 cultists from Chaos, or 10 Hormagaunts, Termagants from Nids, a unit of 10 boys or Gretchen from Orcs, just little chaff units like that you don't need, you can charge that unit. Even if it's only a 10-man, you can charge that unit into a Transcendent Catan who's only got 5 attacks, most likely going to kill like 4 infantry models from your squad, maybe even only 3. And then possibly you can fail a morale, but you're only going to lose 1 or 2 models to that. And you've still got half a squad left, tying them up in combat. And when the Transcendent Catans can only do 1 Catan power, they're not very likely to get out in the movement phase, at the end of the movement phase either. So they're probably going to have to spend your turn fighting that chaff unit as well, which is, of course, very nice. That's what I mean. Just chucking these little chaff units into these 270-point Catans could just hold them up and stop them doing what they want to do and allow the rest of your army to play around them. So those are like 5 or 6 tips on how I would tackle that list. Let's have a look at modifications, because I really like the way that this list works. I like the theme of it and what it's supposed to do and how it all synergizes. But to make it more efficient, there are quite a lot of modifications that you can make. So on to modifications here. Now, If you look at the way that this list works, it wants to only use a couple of stratagems. So I appreciate why the patrol is there, and the immortals do give you some ranged threat. However, I don't think they're necessarily needed for what this army excels at. Let's have a look at the modifications. So the list changes quite drastically. If you just look at it at my left now, it's going to change. And this is the modification list that I would take. So as you can see, quite a lot of modifications have been made to the list. But it's because I don't believe you need the patrols, because I don't think you need to start with that many CPs. I think this list can function with just having 1 or 2 command points at the start of the game. Because you've got to remember, over 5 turns, you're going to gain 5 CPs as well. So essentially, only starting the game with 2 command points, you're going to have 7 command points throughout the game. And like I said, there aren't very many stratagems that this list relies on, really. You're probably going to want to spend the cast an extra Catan power, that's 1 CP. And then you also had the enslaved protectors, which was the 1 CP stratagem that let the wraiths heroically intervene. But as you can see, the wraiths are gone from the list now, so you're not even going to need that. So you probably, at some point in the game, you're going to want to do an extra Catan power. Maybe you want to do that every turn, which you've got the CPs to do. And then at some point, you might want to use Quantum Deflection on the Catacomb Command Barge Lords, and that is it pretty much. They're the only stratagems you really want to use in this army. It kind of functions the way that it should by just the regular abilities that all the units have. So that's why the list looks the way that it does. So as you can see, there are no patrols. There's an Outrider, which costs you 3 command points. Then there's a Vanguard, which costs you 3. There's an Auxiliary, which costs you 2. There's an extra Warlord trait and extra Relic. So you're spending 10 CPs and you're starting the game with just 2. But as I say, they're not really needed for this army to work. And the army functions a lot better. As you can see, there are 9 units in the list now that can all do actions for you. So whereas before, you just had 2 units of 2 crypto thralls, and then you were using big 10-man immortal units to do secondaries for you, like raising banners or scrambling for you, which is not ideal. You know, you're putting a lot of points into those units. You want them to be able to do something else, like be a good shooting threat. But then just 2 units of 2 crypto thralls doesn't help you that much with, you know, performing your actions. So if you want to do that and take it further, this is what you should do. So the list plays primaries and the list plays secondaries. The list that we've got now plays primaries even better and secondaries even better. As you can see, there's a second Catacomb Command Barge Lord in there now, and he's got Eternal Madness, so he has full rerolls to wound, and he's got the Void Reaper, replacing his War Scythe, and it's flat 3 damage, and it can ignore abilities that, you know, cap the number of wounds you can take. So you can run up to something like Ghazghkull or another Catan if you come up against another Necron army and just make it lose like 6, maybe even 9 wounds in one go. So you've now got 2 command barge lords, so you've got more of a counterpunch. They just whiz round, like we were saying, the one that was really good at whizzing around your own units, offering some fire support and then being a decent counterpunch. You've now got 2 of them whizzing around, being decent fire support between them, and then really good counterpunch because there's 2 of them when people run at you. And, you know, they can't be targeted. So it's great having the 2 command barge lords, especially because they move so quick. Then you've now got 3 units of 2 crypto thralls, 3 units of 5 flayed ones, and 3 units of 3 Ophidian destroyers. You've got these 9 units that are all infantry. They can all help you do primaries really well because they still all obsec, but then they can also do the things like scramblers for you, all the actions, and raising banners. And the brilliant thing about it is 6 of those units can naturally just arrive from reserve. So you can have your 3 units of 2 crypto thralls blocking off your back end, playing your backfield and holding objectives for you. But then you can have your Ophidian destroyers coming in from reserve, 9 inches away from the enemy. And you can do the exact same thing with the flayed ones. So you've got 6 units of infantry that can pop up wherever they want, steal objectives off your opponent, do scramblers, no problem, do things like line breaker for you as well if you want, no problem. And they just help you play the game infinitely better than the original list, I think. And then you've still got, well, you've now got 3 units of Scarab Swarms to do like the protecting of your Catans and running forward with them, and the triple Catan is still there. So personally, I just think that the list functions a lot better because it played primaries well and we've just made it do it even better, and it played secondaries well and we've made we've made it do that even better as well. And we've kind of gone away from these two big immortal units to make it even more MSU, and you've got even more units giving yourself more board presence, and you now have double Command Barge Lord. So they are all the modifications I would make. And I think this list has got some solid legs, and it will give even the newest armies and the most competitive armies in the game a really good run for their money. I really hope you've enjoyed this roster review, everyone. And like I say, please use the link below if you would like a chance to have your roster also reviewed here. And until next week, see you later, guys.